I want to begin by acknowledging that the lands on which Memorial University campuses are situated are in the traditional territories of diverse Indigenous groups, and we acknowledge with respect the history and culture of the Beothuk, the Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit of this province. So I am so pleased to virtually welcome His Excellency Tong Peiwu to Memorial University. You know, we received the request a number of months ago to organize this presentation, and we always welcome the opportunity to have our community interact with ambassadors and dignitaries from different countries. You know, Memorial University is home to 350 graduate and undergraduate Chinese students this year, and we've established relationships with numerous Chinese universities. These relationships make it possible for research collaboration and student exchange, and we are all richer for it. Now, I appreciate you all taking the time to join us today, and I hope everyone attending today's presentation will gain a better understanding of China's social and economic development. I'm going to stay on because I want to listen and learn from His Excellency. So now I'm going to turn the floor over to Dr. Jennifer Simpson, the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences. Jennifer, over to you.
Thank you, President Timmons. It's really great to be here today with everyone who's on the call, who you can see, and also who's joined. So thanks for coming. Dr. Timmons, exactly as you said, I think this event represents what universities do best, which is bringing people together for public conversations about issues that matter. And especially, I know I heard earlier that there are students, classes involved with this call and this conversation. And I really want to emphasize the advantages of having conversations like this at universities, where we can ask important questions about public life, have conversations and engagement around issues that matter. I think in this particular example, we have issues that matter to His Excellency the Ambassador and the university, issues that matter to China and to Canada. There's issues that are going on right now in China. Economic and social development are high on in public attention right now. We have a parallel video by one of our faculty members in political science looking at elections in Newfoundland. So these are all examples of issues that we can come together and talk about. So today's event really points to the value of universities as places for important conversations. I'm going to do a couple quick introductions, and then I will turn it over to Chris O'Neill Yates. So I'm very glad to introduce Chris O'Neill Yates, who is CBC Newfoundland's national reporter for CBC TV, radio, and CBC.ca. Her investigative journalism has garnered multiple awards, including from the Canadian Association of Journalists, Radio, Television, Digital News Association, the Atlantic Journalism Awards, and the Canadian Bar Association. Chris O'Neill Yates has been working in journalism for about 30 years. She is multilingual and holds degrees from Memorial University, from University of King's College, and from King's College London. So we're really happy to have Chris O'Neill Yates moderating. Thank you for that. And I'm also very, very pleased to introduce His Excellency the Ambassador Tong Peiwu. Very glad to have you joining us today. Most recently, and since 2019, His Excellency Ambassador Tong Peiwu is the Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the People's Republic of China to Canada. He has also served as the Director General and in numerous other roles in the Department of North American and Oceanian Affairs. He has served as the Minister Counselor, Embassy of the People's Republic of China in the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And he has also served as the second and first secretary to the Embassy of the People's Republic of China in Canada. These are just a few of His Excellency Ambassador's many accomplishments. And with that, I will now turn it over to Chris O'Neill Yates. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Dr. Simpson, for your kind introduction. Before we welcome the ambassador's address, I'd like to let people know that following the address, he has kindly offered to take questions from the audience. The Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences email can be used to submit your question. It's hss@mun.ca. I'd like to let you know that this event will be recorded, and at some point in the future, I think next week, it will be put on the Memorial University YouTube channel. So we'd like to get to as many of your questions as possible today following the address by the ambassador. So I won't be repeating questions that have already been asked, but if you'd like to follow up on a point from your question, just put follow up in the subject line and I will ask your question as you have stated it. So the address again is hss@mun.ca in order to submit a question to the ambassador following his address. And Memorial University would like to extend to everyone that this event takes place within its guidelines of a respectful, informative, and productive session. And I'm sure there'll be lots of interesting questions today. And without further ado, I turn it over to you, Ambassador, to give your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you all for the kind introduction. President Timmons, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It gives me great pleasure to exchange views on China and China-Canada relations through video link. And I think speaking of Newfoundland and Labrador, we can't help but remember that when more than 200 flights were diverted to Canada after the 9/11 incident in 2001, the people in Newfoundland opened their arms to accept thousands of passengers from all over the world and help them get through the crisis. Also on Christmas in 2019, when flight was forced to divert to Deer Lake due to weather conditions, residents gave up reunion with their families and spontaneously provided passengers with food and transportation. And I think this kind of practice had demonstrated that the people of Newfoundland are considered very Canadian and have become all Canadians' pride. So for myself, in November 2019, I visited Newfoundland for the first time as a new Chinese ambassador to Canada. During that trip, I visited the Memorial University. And although the time was short, the beautiful campus, the strong faculty, and the first-class teaching quality left me with a very deep impression. President Timmons is a good friend of the Chinese Embassy in Canada and the Chinese people. The two universities where she has been serving as president cooperate closely with China. I have learned that the Chinese students here are also well taken care of by the university and the community, and they have achieved success in their studies. I want to express my heartfelt thanks to President Timmons and the Memorial University, and I hope that Newfoundland and the university will carry out more mutually beneficial cooperation with China. Ladies and gentlemen, with China's rapid development, what kind of foreign policy will China pursue? And what role China will play in the international arena have attracted much attention all over the world. I want to share with you some thoughts of mine. Of course, there are so many things to talk about regarding China's foreign policy, and I would like to share with you 3 points. First, China is a builder of world peace, not a challenger. China has always pursued an independent and a peaceful foreign policy, deciding its position and policies based on the merits of the matter itself and never yield to any outside pressure. For more than 70 years, China has never provoked a war or occupied an inch of land in other countries. We have been advocating dialogues to bridge differences and negotiations to settle disputes. We are committed to handling territorial issues and maritime boundary disputes through negotiations and have entirely resolved land border issues with 12 out of 14 neighboring countries. We have no intention of exporting ideology. We advocate harmony in diversity, and we don't subvert other countries' regimes like some countries do. We actively participate in mediation on hotspot issues. We are the second largest contributor to the United Nations regular budget and the peacekeeping budget. We also send the largest number of peacekeeping troops among the permanent members of the UN Security Council. Secondly, China is a contributor to global development, not a predator. After more than 40 years of reform and opening up, China has now developed into the world's second largest economy, with a middle-income population of more than 400 million. Not long ago, President Xi Jinping solemnly declared that we had scored a complete victory in the fight against poverty. And this is a miracle in the history of human poverty reduction. I believe anyone who has been to China will rejoice in the great changes in China's development. These achievements have been made by the 1.4 billion Chinese people with their own hands under the strong leadership of the Communist Party of China. We never engage ourselves in colonialism, war, or plunder. On the contrary, we advocate all under heaven are of one family, and all under heaven are of great unity. We believe that human beings live on the same earth, and it is a community with a shared future for humankind, in which we are among each other. While developing ourselves, we advocate openness and win-win, and actively share China's development opportunities with the world. China has contributed more than 30% to the world economic growth every year for many years. The Belt and Road Initiative proposed by China has become the world's most popular public good and the largest economic cooperation platform. China has signed cooperation documents with more than 170 countries and international organizations to build the Belt and Road, which has effectively promoted the development of countries along the route and supported over 300,000 jobs. Thirdly, China is an upholder of international order, not a destroyer. China firmly upholds the international system with the United Nations at its core, and the international order based on international law, supports multilateralism, opposes unilateralism, and advocates equality between large and small countries. We believe that international affairs should be handled by consultation between countries, not by power. China has so far joined almost all intergovernmental international organizations and more than 500 international conventions. China has made significant contributions to the conclusion and implementation of the Paris Agreement. China will strive to peak CO2 emissions by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2060. Through constructive efforts, China has continuously been a source of confidence in world peace and stability. However, some Western media and politicians have been hyping up the China threat theory, China infiltration theory, and more. Most of them have never been to China. Their arguments are either out of ignorance and prejudice, or out of political gain. In essence, they cannot bear the sight of China's development and growth and try to create some disturbance and noise. In short, China's peaceful foreign policy is based on the fine tradition of China's 5,000 years of civilization. The Chinese nation is a peace-loving nation. Since ancient times, it has been pursuing peace, harmony, and cordiality. Cultures such as harmony is the most important, great unity under the heaven, and more have incorporated into the genes of the Chinese people. China's peaceful foreign policy shows the affection of the Communist Party of China for the world even more. The original aspiration and mission of the CPC is to seek happiness for the Chinese people and a great renewal for the Chinese nation, and to seek great unity for the world. Promoting the construction of a community with a shared future for humankind has been written into the constitution of the CPC and China's constitution. No matter how developed China is, it will not seek hegemony. China will make unremitting efforts to promote world peace, stability, and development. Ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to China-Canada relations, our two countries are both very far and very close. Geographically, China and Canada are tens of thousands of miles apart, but due to historical, economic, trade, and cultural factors, the ties between our two countries are close, and so are the feelings between the two peoples. Last year, during the difficult period of the fight against the pandemic, China and Canada provided mutual medical assistance, which once again demonstrated the fine tradition of mutual support for each other. It is worth mentioning that affected by the pandemic, Canada's overall exports fell by 12% last year, while its export to China increased by 8%. The two sides also have a common language in a wide range of areas, such as safeguarding multilateralism, tackling climate change, and protecting the environment. Under the new situation, the areas of China-Canada cooperation are expanding, not shrinking. This year marks the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Communist Party of China, and also the first year of China's 14th five-year plan. China has entered a stage of high-quality development and will continue to work on expanding opening up. This means Canada has more opportunities to cooperate with China. The first is more opportunities for economic and trade cooperation. At present, deepening and expanding the economic and trade cooperation between the two countries are met with more favorable conditions. On the one hand, the two countries' economies are highly complementary. With economic development and improvement of people's living standards, we need higher quality products and services, and are paying more attention to practicing the new development ideas of innovation, coordination, greenness, openness, and sharing. Canada has unique advantages in finance, energy, aviation, green development, new urbanization construction, and modern industrial system construction, just to name a few of them. The two sides have huge potential for cooperation. On the other hand, our two countries have certain bases of public opinions. The two Canadian business circles remain optimistic about the prospects of China-related business. More than 60% of the interviewed companies indicated that they would maintain or improve China's position in their future global business layout. The second is new opportunities for scientific and technological cooperation. The two sides have established a number of China-Canada joint committees and working groups for cooperation in science and technology, agriculture, environment and clean technology, as well as climate change and health policy dialogue mechanisms. Since the outbreak of the pandemic, China and Canada have maintained close communication, and the Chinese medical experts have shared experience in the treatment and the prevention of the pandemic with the Canadian side through video links. We will continue to encourage and support the cooperation between the two sides in the fields of energy resources, technological innovation, modern agriculture, energy conservation and environmental protection, and healthcare. The third is more substantial opportunities for cultural cooperation. China has a long history, splendid culture, magnificent mountains and rivers, and the common development of multi-ethnic cultures. Taking Xinjiang as an example, the local Uyghur and other ethnic cultures have long-term exchange and integration. The Uyghur population in Xinjiang has more than doubled in the past 4 decades, and the spoken and written languages and the religious culture of all ethnic groups have been respected and protected. The Constitution of the People's Republic of China and the law of the People's Republic of China on regional autonomy of ethnic groups clearly stipulate that all ethnic groups have the freedom to use and develop their own spoken and written languages. At present, we are stepping up preparations for the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics. With diverse cultures and rich tourism resources, Canada is a strong country in winter sports. In future, after ensuring the prevention and the control of the pandemic, the two sides can strengthen information and policy communication, create a safe tourism environment, steadily promote the recovery of culture and tourism industries, and provide assistance for the improvement and the development of bilateral relations. The fourth is opportunities for deeper education cooperation. As of 2020, the education institutions in the two countries have signed more than 700 education cooperation agreements. Canadian universities have advantages in research and innovation in the fields of clean energy, life and health, climate change, agriculture and food, and the marine science. China's strategic development of Hainan Free Trade Port, Xiong'an New Area, the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau Greater Bay Area, the Yangtze River Delta, and the revitalization of higher education in the central and the western part of China have brought new opportunities to Canadian universities. There are more than 200,000 Chinese students studying in Canada, but there are only about 1,300 Canadian students studying in China. We do encourage and welcome Canadian students to go to study in China on the Chinese government scholarship programs, such as China-Canada Scholars Exchange Program and the Canada Learning Initiative in China, to learn from each other, making two-way studying abroad and educational cooperation a positive factor in China-Canada friendship. Ladies and gentlemen, as we all know, the current China-Canada relations are facing serious difficulties due to the Meng Wanzhou incident. The purpose of the United States manipulating the incident was to undercut Chinese high-tech companies. The Canadian side detained Meng Wanzhou, a Chinese citizen who has not violated any Canadian laws, without reason at the request of the US side. This is a truly arbitrary detention. Some Canadian politicians act unfriendly to China. Some media distort facts in order to attract attention, stigmatize China, and mislead the public. China strongly condemns the imposition of sanctions by Canada, the US, the UK, and the EU on the so-called pretext of human rights. And this move is based on nothing but lies and disinformation. These wrongdoings by the Canadian side have seriously damaged the relations between the two countries, poisoned the atmosphere of the bilateral relations, and hurt the feelings of the Chinese people. Canada should correct its mistakes as soon as possible, release Ms. Meng to return home safely, and create favorable conditions for the two countries to return to the right track. Ladies and gentlemen, 20 years ago, when I first worked at the Chinese embassy in Canada, I had a plan to visit Newfoundland. However, the flight was cancelled due to the heavy fog in St. John's that particular day. 20 years later, foggy weather still sometimes appears. But I hope the people of Newfoundland can get rid of the fog of misunderstanding and view China's development and the potential of China-Canada in a more comprehensive and objective manner. I also hope that the Memorial University can become an active participant in the development of China-Canada relations and contribute to the improvement and the development of our bilateral relationship. Let us work together to abide by the principles of mutual respect and equal treatment, and eliminate all kinds of interference, increase mutual understanding, and promote the healthy and stable development of China-Canada relations, so to better serve the interests of our two peoples. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your remarks, Ambassador. I'm going to just let the people who are on the at the presentation today, just going to give the email address once again to submit a question to the ambassador. We'll have about 20-25 minutes or so to take it for him to take questions. And the address to submit them at is hss@mun.ca. We've had a couple of questions come in, Ambassador, while you were speaking. And the first one comes from Deborah. She asked, does China plan any investment in Newfoundland and Labrador? And what kind of investment is that? For example, is it connected to the Belt Road Initiative?
Okay, thank you. And I think we are very much interested in conducting this kind of business cooperation and all the other practical cooperation with the province of Newfoundland. Actually, last time when I was in Newfoundland, that was back in November 2019, I had extensive discussion with the people, the senior officials of the government there, and also the business people in the region. And they all talk, very positively about this kind of cooperation. Currently, I think one of our largest energy cooperation, they are considering setting up an offshore drill, in the Newfoundland. Because of the COVID-19, I think there was some kind of delay, but I think they are still willing to move ahead with the plan. So that's one part of the projects, for us to explore for the energy sector And also, I think there's a lot more, like for the Newfoundland, it has unique advantages in the fishing industry, in the marine, ocean economy. I think there's a lot more that we can do together. Of course, it can also be called, initiative under Belt and Road Initiative. We do welcome the Canadian side to take part in this kind of projects, although it seems that it's so far from the Belt and Road route. But still, I think it's becoming a global public good platform. As I just mentioned, more than 170 countries and international organizations have been signing a cooperation memorandum over that. So I do hope that in future time, we can have more detailed discussion as to which specific areas that we can further explore. And I do hope that the people in Newfoundland and Labrador, with their talent and creativity and diligence, will embrace on more business opportunities with China, as China is entering a new development stage. Thank you.
One of the questions, and I'll skip number 2 and go to number 3 because it's related to that. Sean wants you to explain the Belt and Road Initiative, if you could do that.
Yeah, the initiative was put forward about 8 years ago, and the purpose is not, as someone claims, is for geopolitical gains. It's for economic and social development between China and the countries. Originally, it's along the route of Silk Road and the Maritime Silk Road. But later on, because more and more international community members have been interested in that, so it's expanded. And the purpose is for the extensive consultation, joint contribution, and the shared benefits. And I think that worked. For example, in the Central Asian countries, which borders China in the Northwest region, they benefited a lot from this kind of social and economic development. And in Africa, I think over the years, a lot of highways and ports have been constructed with the help of the Chinese side. Of course, the local people, they also benefit a lot because not only created job opportunities for them, but making them that they can have more access to the outside, so they can sell their goods to the outside and make a lot of money. So that helps to promote the living standard of the people in the local communities. So I think all the countries taking part in that benefit from this kind of initiative, not only China, but other countries. And in more recent years, it's becoming, not only for economic development, but we also emphasize on the green development and on the health. Especially last year, we are confronted with COVID-19. So as you can imagine, a lot more attention had been focused on the healthcare side of the cooperation. And we are making sure that it's a clean Silk and Road projects. And we are fighting against corruption, things like that. So there's a lot more to talk about the Belt and Road Initiative, but I just want to share with you some of the points. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. And our next question comes from Liam. He asks, and I guess in the context, you mentioned that the relationship with Canada is seriously damaged and that there's a poisoned atmosphere. What does the Trudeau government have to do, if anything, to repair relations with China?
As I mentioned, the main obstacle between our two countries remains the Meng Wanzhou incident. Of course, the United States plotted the incident. So it's the one, and we do ask the United States to revoke the detention request for Madame Meng. But also here, actually, unfortunately, Canada was involved in the incident. So it is hoped that the Canadian side will also take steps to release Madame Meng. And I can see, a lot more people here in Canada, they have seen through the nature of the incident And they also urge the government to do something in this regard. So hopefully, the Canadian side will be listen to those voices. And of course, at the same time, I'm suggesting that also the government will lead the general public in a more objective reading of China, just as I mentioned, because there's a kind of tendency that some anti-China forces, first in the United States, like you had observed for the past few years under the previous administration of the United States, they had been engaged in those groundless accusations against China, those smearings. And that has a spillover effect, into Canada and other Western countries. So we do hope here the government will play a constructive role in making sure that people will have a better understanding of China. Of course, we are firmly opposed to those sanctions, the measures of that, and we do urge the government here to revoke those kind of wrongful practices. Thank you.
Ambassador, with the revelation of diplomatic sanctions on Chinese officials and entities by the EU, the UK, and the US and Canada, China has promised a firm response to that, to any meddling in Chinese affairs. What sanctions are anticipated for Canadian officials or entities by China? This is a question from Austin.
China is not the one to provoke these kind of things. As I mentioned, China pursues a independent foreign policy of peace. So we would like to see that we develop friendly relations with all the countries on the basis of mutual respect and equal treatment. But at the same time, also, we would take resolute measures to safeguard our national sovereignty, security, and development interests. So I think in this regard, I would like to suggest that people do not underestimate China's resolve, to do so. But for the specific measures, I would like to suggest that whatever should come will come. So let's wait and see. Thank you.
Ambassador Chen is asking about carbon neutrality being put forward by the People's Congress, and whether you could say what the environmental strategy is and what your idea is about global cooperation in overcoming environmental issues.
It's becoming more important back in China, I think when it comes to the coping with climate change, for the green development, for environmental protection, because we have come to realize that dates back to many years ago that, we cannot only focus on the GDP itself. We have to make sure that we leave a beautiful environment, a safe environment to our children and the grandchildren. So that's why for this new development philosophy, we emphasize much on the green development. And for the next 5-year plan, we are committed to cut the CO2 emission by 18%. And we have committed that we'll strive to achieve the peak of that, the CO2 emission by 2030, and the carbon neutrality by 2060. Although it's a very difficult job, because as you can see, China is a still developing country, which undergoes the industrialization stage. But still, we are, making this kind of commitments. And for us, our tradition is that if we make commitments, and we will do everything possible to honor those commitments. And over the past years, we have done a lot of things in this regard, like for the renewable energy. Currently, the ratio is close to 20%. That's a big step forward. And for the new energy cars, the stock of the world, more than 50% of that is in China. So we can see our ambition in achieving these goals. Of course, China can not do it alone. We must cooperate with the international communities. So that's why we have done a lot of things in making sure that the Paris Agreement is there. And also, we are going to implement that. And unfortunately, for the previous years, the previous US administration, they had backed off from those commitments. And of course, it is a good news to learn that they are coming back. So together we can do a lot of things. Canada, the United States, EU, and we do have a mechanism, not only bilateral cooperation with Canada, but we do have a EU, Canada, and China cooperation mechanism on climate change. And we have held several meetings at senior officials level. So we hope this kind of thing will become more common in coming months and coming years. And we are looking forward to this practical cooperation with the Canadian side and the other members of the international community. Thank you.
Ambassador Tong, Austin is asking, he says he believes that the threat of nuclear conflict remains a very significant danger to the world. If there were a prospect for global de-weaponization of nuclear energy, would China be a proponent of this?
It means nuclear energy, whether it's in the civil area, I'm not so sure it's for a military sense or it's a civil.
In the military sense, yes. He's talking about, the de-weaponization of nuclear energy that's currently being used.
Okay.
Would China support this?
Yeah, for us, from the day one, which, when we had the, nuclear weapon, we announced that we will not use nuclear weapons first, and we will not use that against those non-nuclear weapon states. So it demonstrates, on our part, for us, nuclear weapons are just for self-defense, and we actually advocate eventually that we have this nuclear disarmament. That's enshrined in our policy, and we always advocate that. And we believe for those two countries, the United States and Russia, because they hold the largest nuclear arsenals in the world, respectively. So it's naturally falls on their shoulders to take these efforts in the regard for the nuclear disarmament. And of course, on our part, we will continue to make sure that China stands forth for peace and stability. And we will be engaged in those kind of negotiations and talks like the conference on disarmament, the CD in Geneva. We have been always an active participant in those progress. Thank you.
I'm going to give out the email address again. We still have some time for questions. That is at hss@mon.ca, hss@mon.ca. Submit your questions. They will be relayed to me, and I will relay them to the ambassador. Jun Chang is asking, Ambassador, if you'd like to give some advice on how to make it possible for international students who are not so highly ranked to get offers from good company. She's referring to companies in China looking for international students who focus on the school's rating and on the country.
For us, we would like to see that the free movement among students after their graduation, for us, we encourage students go out to the outside to be enrolled in higher education. Like I mentioned here, there are more than 200,000 of them. Currently, some of them have returned because of pandemic, but I think after the pandemic is brought under control, more and more students would like to come here. And also, if they would like to go back to China to seek jobs, also it is okay. And for other international students, I think it's also a good practice if they can have some working opportunities in China. So I think it's up to the companies for themselves to decide what kind of human resources they are interested in. And I think currently there's a tendency among some companies, they emphasize too much on the, say, whether it's a master degree, or undergraduate, postgraduate, this kind of thing. But I think an increasing number of companies, they would not only look at those certificates, and rather as the talents of the students and their skills, and also their ability to adapt to new things, new challenges. So I think it's basically up to the companies, markets themselves to decide nowadays. Thank you.
Ambassador, you mentioned about retaining the language, the culture, and in places like Xinjiang, and you disputed the fact that international media is saying that there are camps in which people are being forcibly detained, forcibly sterilized, and potentially forcibly working for forced labor. And you also mentioned that you're part of the United Nations, and there's been a quest to have the United Nations come in and look at the detention centers in Xinjiang. If there's nothing to see in Xinjiang, why will the party not admit the United Nations and settle this for once and for all, if the whole international community is wrong about what's happening in Xinjiang?
We do welcome more and more people to visit Xinjiang, those fair-minded people. And the figure is that back in 2019, more than 200 million tourists, they visited Xinjiang. And a large number of that came from overseas. And they all saw with their own eyes that people there, living in prosperity and stability, in addition to the beautiful landscape they have seen. So if there's anything like this atrocities happening in Xinjiang, how can they just, 200 million of them turn blind eye to that? And there's no concentration camps at all. And for those, they are schools in nature, and they have been set up in accordance with law. And the purpose for that is to make sure that we cut off terrorism at its root source. So we copied the practices from other countries like France. They have de-radicalization centers.
Ambassador, with respect, France does not have millions of people in detention centers.
So I just want to say they are not camps or detention centers. They are schools in nature. They are similar in nature for those de-radicalization centers in France and the assistance and the disengagement programs in UK. And they are in line with all those international documents like the UN Global Strategy for Counterterrorism. And I think that works because after the trainees graduated from schools, they learned the laws and the regulations, and more importantly, they mastered labor skills. So with the help of the government, they found jobs and they are make a living, on their own. Otherwise, they will easily be influenced by those radical ideas and making bombs instead. And for all those so-called forced labor, forced sterilization, there's nothing like that. For the people in Xinjiang, of all the ethnic groups, they have their freedom to choose their occupation and to go everywhere they want for seeking jobs. Within Xinjiang, it's okay. And if they go to coastal areas, because some of them believe there are higher salaries there, and that's also okay. And so we do encourage more people to go to Xinjiang. And for the Human Rights High Commissioner of the United Nations, we also welcome her to visit Xinjiang. Of course, the visit itself should be designed to promote mutual understanding and not, as someone claimed, that they have in their mind that China is guilty even before they go to visit Xinjiang. And I would like to add that for those Arab countries, a lot of them have sent envoys to Xinjiang last October, envoys from 20 Arabian countries, plus from the League of Arabian Nations. They went to Xinjiang, and also they came back with very positive remarks about Xinjiang and its stability and the people living there in harmony.
Ambassador, Sean would like to know what China's pledge exactly is to the Paris Accord.
You know that for us, we are doing all we can to make sure that we will achieve the carbon CO2 emission, the peak of that by 2030. And we are scaling up our national determined contributions in this regard. So first, we are cutting off the carbon emission, as I mentioned, for the next 5 years, they will be cut by 18%. And also at the same time, we are making sure that we are focusing on more renewable energy, to make sure that it will be increased. The ratio of that will be even higher than currently, close to 20%. And also we are doing a lot of things to make sure that our forest coverage will be expanded. So a lot of things, combined together, that we will make sure that we follow through on this agreement and to make sure that we work with the rest of the international community for achieving, a clean environment. Thank you.
Ambassador, the final question comes from me, and I guess the elephant in the room here today is the two Michaels who are detained, and we saw media and observers outside the courtroom who were not allowed in. These two men have been detained for 2 years without consular assistance, without any kind of legal assistance. And this is the elephant in the room, as I said, between Canada and China. I mean, you talk about due process and you talk about rule of law, but the understanding of rule of law in Canada is obviously very different than yours. You connected it to Meng Wanzhou. Is this a quid pro quo? Are these men being held because of Meng Wanzhou? And why have they not been given the kind of fair trial that they would expect in a country that follows the rule of law?
I didn't mention that these cases are connected or linked. And on the contrary, there were some people here in Canada, they suggest those cases are connected. But as I just mentioned, the Meng Wanzhou incident is a political incident. It's concocted by the United States, and Canada was unfortunately involved in that. But for those two Canadian citizens, they have been detained and prosecuted because of suspected crimes undermining China's national security. So
why cannot Canada find out, though, what the exact crimes are and what they're being accused of?
There are, those details, like for the Michael Kovrig, it's gathering state secrets and intelligence for foreign forces. And for Michael Spavor, it's stealing and illegally providing state secrets to foreign forces. And they have been prosecuted and tried by relevant Chinese judicial organs independently and in accordance with law. And at the same time, their lawful rights, including the consular access, including the litigation rights, have been guaranteed. And when it comes to the trial itself, according to relevant articles of Chinese laws, they cannot be set on trial in an open way because of the national security is involved. And that's happening here in Canada as well, because according to the criminal law of Canada, judges can decide by themselves whether the trials should be open because of the reason of national security.
Ambassador, I'm just going to, if you would excuse me, I'm just going to ask a follow-up. You mentioned that, and this is about education, you mentioned that 200,000 Chinese students study in Canada, and there are only 1,200, I believe, if I got your number correct, Canadian students who study in China. But why would any Canadian go to China knowing that some political incident could happen and they would be arbitrarily detained in the same way the two Michaels have been?
I think that when it comes to the Canadian people going to China, whether it's for business or tourism or study, they should not be afraid of anything like that. But of course, if very, very small number of people, they are engaged in those criminal activities, whether it's Canadian or other nationalities, of course, it's quite reasonable and justified for us to take relevant measures. But I think for the vast majority of people, they should not be worried about that. And I think that's why when I talk to people here, all the presidents from the universities of the U15, they would like to encourage their students to go to China, whether it's for a semester or it's just for a few weeks of study, so that they can learn a lot more about China. And for those people here, when I talk to them, as long as they have been to China, I think more or less they have a more objective reading of China. China is not a police state, you know. Some people would suggest that China has a curfew. It's nothing like that. If you walk on the Chinese streets, it's quite safe. And that's the impression of so many foreigners going to China. So really, I'd like to...
Ambassador, I'd like to thank you there because I'd like to keep in time with the university schedule here. Thank you for your presentation and for taking our questions. Before I leave you, I'd like to thank some people, of course, yourself today for being with us and for taking some questions. A number came in too late for us to get to ask. We'd like to thank the HSS faculty and staff, Humanities and Social Sciences at Memorial University, President Timmins for joining us today, and to everyone online for their interest in foreign relations between Canada and China. Thank you to everyone for joining us. This, I should remind you, will be, this session will be put online at some later date. The university will send out some notification to let you know when this will happen. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Your Excellency.